Hi, everybody, and welcome to this special Solas ministry update. We are really grateful to all those of you who support our work in prayer, financially, practically, and by encouraging us as well. And it's important that we don't just sort of say thank you to you, but that we also kind of get back to you and tell you about some of the things that have been going on around the country. Now, every Friday on our website, we do have a news section that will give you updates regularly. But this week, we wanted to give you a special update because we are coming towards the end of the university mission season. There are Christian Union or CU groups all across the country, and sort of in the first 3 months of the year, they always have a concerted effort to take the gospel to their campus, and that's always in the middle of the year because it's after the new students have settled in, but before they kind of hit exam season and their finals at the end of the year. And so they all go flat out at this time of year to hold what they call events weeks. And it makes it an incredibly busy season for those of us at Solas, especially for Andy Bannister. And we often have to say, no, sorry, we can't come because we can't put Andy in more than 2 or 3 campuses at the same time. This year, of course, we've massively increased our capacity by adding Steve Osmond to the team. And I'm delighted that Andy and Steve are with us today. And I'm going to ask them a few questions about their experiences of what the university mission season has been like in 2024. So welcome, Steve. Welcome, Andy. Tell us, first of all, don't mind who goes first, which cities, which campuses have you been on this year?
So this year I have been I've done three or certainly in these last few weeks I've done Reading University and Christchurch, Canterbury University, and then just a few days ago I was up in Lancaster doing Lancaster University. But sorry, Steve, where have you been?
You've been around a little more than I have. Don't know where you get the energy because these things, as I've now experienced, are pretty
Coffee is the answer.
grueling. Coffee is the answer. So I was with the University of St Andrews with their CU for the full week that they did, and then I was in Glasgow at the Glasgow University just doing a few lunch bars.
And you did a church-based student evangelism thing in Edinburgh as well.
Yes.
Slightly different, but
I
yeah.
did that. Yeah, so it wasn't that wasn't particularly with the CUs, but it was aimed at students, so very much in the same ballpark. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Andy, you've done loads of these missions, not just this year, but over the years. Do they vary much from city to city, campus to campus, different student
Yeah,
bodies?
yeah, they do. There are some similarities. Most university missions, they tend to do like something at lunchtime. So what we call lunch bars are quite common. So they'll offer free food and you'll take a topic, have Q&A afterwards, and kind of use that to spark conversations and whatnot. And people invite their friends, and then in the evening there'll be something in the kind of evening, often another kind of message and a chance to respond and so on. But then the way those are structured are often quite different, and then other pieces around those. So, for example, Canterbury, where I was for the complete kind of week this year, they did as well as those things, they did an international dinner at 5 o'clock, and they invited lots of international students. So it was fantastic. On one occasion, I was sitting around a table full of Pakistani, I think, engineering students. Another day, I had like Chinese and Japanese people at the table, and that's real opportunity because we forget that although a lot of kind of sort of old school kind of sort of Westerners can be a bit sort of secular and a bit like straight lines to go, people coming from abroad often come from cultures where faith is just taken as an everyday part of life, and they're totally up for having conversations about beliefs and spirituality and faith and religion. They may be bringing very different ideas into those conversations, but again, if you offer food and hospitality and a chance to chat together, often people love to come. So yeah, there are similarities and differences, and then in scale too. So sometimes the mission weeks are smaller, sometimes bigger. So the last 3 weeks I've done an event as small as 12 people. I've done an event as big as 245 people. So it's fun. There's a range.
Yeah, there's also a rumor that the CUs vary as well in terms of their levels of organisation. But I won't ask you to comment on which of the
My lips
CUs,
are
but
sealed.
very
My lips
absolutely. But I mean, very hugely varied in student bodies as well as the kind of mission fields. Steve, you have arrived in the UK within the last year, and this is your first time doing student mission in the UK. I know you've done it elsewhere. What are your first impressions of student ministry, boots on the ground here in Scotland?
Yeah, so I just love student ministry, be it in South Africa or here. I think our students are just fascinating creatures. No, I think it's the phase of life that people are in there. They're studying, they figuring out the things that they're passionate about, and the big questions of life. It seems to me that students are far more open to engaging about these things. And so for me, moving over and particularly thinking about Scotland and the context here, I did have a bit of apprehension at first, thinking, okay, I know Scotland is by and large far more secular than the contexts in South Africa that I've been used to working in. And so I was really anticipating quite a bit more of the really like antagonistic, anti-religious type of atmosphere. But I think what I've been really surprised and really, really encouraged by is that there is definitely an openness to the idea of God, to hearing from people of different views, and particularly hearing teaching that Jesus did, or hearing about Christianity and how we see the world and make sense of things. The level of openness there has been quite surprising to me. It doesn't mean that there aren't those who, have big questions and are slightly antagonistic, but I've been really encouraged with just the openness and the engagement that you get on campus when you're speaking. People are tracking, they're answering, they're asking questions, and then the number of really good conversations that I had individually with people has been really good. So yeah, I think I've been encouraged all around. The way that the UCCF works with having the CUs at all of the different universities, slightly different to the setup in South Africa, where it's far more, there are a number more of these smaller, almost like competing ministries at the university. So there's not the cohesion and the potential to put on these much bigger events. So I think, yeah, there's huge potential, and just the fruit that comes out of it is just, like I say, so encouraging.
Very good. And how was it working alongside Christian students? Was that a nice partnership to working with the CU students?
Yeah, so it's the first time that I've obviously come across that kind of setup where it's the CU that is student based, and so it's the students who are organizing all the events. They're the ones that you're interacting with about what are the big topics, what are the questions, how do they want the events to run, and it was just a breath of fresh air. Really, it was fantastic. As you mentioned at the beginning, sometimes things run a bit more smoothly depending on where you're going, but everyone that I've worked with has been fantastic. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and yeah, had a good time. So looking forward to doing more. That's for sure.
Fantastic. Now, Andy, you've clocked up, I don't know how many hundreds of miles in the last few weeks, kind of around the country in these CU missions. A lot of miles, a lot of speaking, meeting a lot of people. What have been the highlights for you of this kind of season of university mission over the last, 4 or 5 weeks? Any particular highlights that stand out as things that in 20 years' time you're going to, oh, now that was special, that was
Oh
important?
gosh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, well, I think one of the highlights is the privilege of coming alongside. I mean, Steve talked a bit about this, but coming alongside Christian students. I mean, together are some amazing people. Just a real privilege to be able to come along and serve and support. And look, as speakers, we come in, we do our thing, we disappear again. But they're there day in, week in, week out, doing that incarnational evangelism, and that just really excites me to see. Generally what's going on, but also some of when you come across people who've really got the spark. And in each of those missions I came across, Christian students. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be your one to watch because there's something going on there. Then the interaction with non-Christians. So, so at Reading, I remember having a really long conversation with somebody, after the talk I'd done on the legacy of the church in history. They had some questions about, I think generally the kind of, Jesus good, church bad was where they were coming from. So just a good opportunity to talk through that. Again, in Canterbury, just some of the international students in particular. I remember sort of having a conversation with one Pakistani student at my table at one of the international dinners, whose question to me, over the meal was, he said, so tell me about the Bible that you Christians, you guys have the Bible. What is it? And I realized it was a genuine question. He had no idea even what the Bible was. He came from a Muslim context, but he wasn't antagonistic. He just knew nothing. And so I thought, that's a really interesting question, because you're quite used to dealing with people who have objections. He had nothing. So I had to try and think of an answer that started from first principles. And then that was really interesting to go from there into why the Bible matters to us, especially in terms of Jesus. And then I think some real highlights. The real highlight for me, then also in the last mission week I did in Lancaster, again, lots of individual ones, but I think the real highlight was we did a Muslim Christian dialogue partway through the week on the Thursday night, And so I had a dialogue with a local imam, moderated by the head of the Islamic Society and one of the Christian Union team, and we had 245 people crammed into the marquee, and just an amazing conversation. God was so good, because those dialogues, they can go in different ways, and you're not quite sure where things are going to go, but just the way that it went. The things that the Imam said that set up the chance to share the gospel again and again and again. And my prayer throughout the whole thing was that we could end on Jesus. And just the way the questions landed, I got the last question, and it was a very natural point to just end on Jesus and who he is. And just the conversations that sprung up, both sides loved it there. The head of the Islamic Society was like, we need to do this again. And I said to the CU, you need to do this again. And then as I left the meeting, the number of conversations between Christians and Muslims that was ongoing. So that was just an amazing highlight. That's one I might be thinking about in 10, 15 years' time.
What do you find most challenging? If that's the most sort of joyful and exciting thing, when you're facing a week of university mission, what's the most challenging thing for you going in as a speaker?
Yeah, I think a couple of things there. I mean, it can be tiring. Ministry is tiring, and I sort of feel it now after 3 weeks of jazzing around the place. So yeah, keeping going, keeping the energy levels up. I think the other thing I'm very conscious of as well, Gavin, is that when as I alluded to earlier, when you come in and do your thing and you disappear again, it can be hard, because you've got to try and pick up the culture, pick up the context, pick up how the CU is functioning. It's not, you don't want to be coming in there telling the CU how to do it. You're there to serve. So trying to pick up all those pieces. One of the highlights as well this year that made this easier, I don't know how it was in St Andrews where Steve was, but certainly the 2 mission weeks that I was there for the longest for Lancaster and for Canterbury, they had really good prayer meetings. So really well attended in the morning. So the students would get together, and I'm quite impressed, because stereotypically students and mornings don't always work. But in Canterbury, we had a 7:30 a.m. worship time, prayer time. A different local pastor came in each morning, did a 10-minute devotional, and we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. And they used the upper room of Starbucks. Other coffee shops are available, but that had come about because one of the students knew one of the managers and had asked, "Hey, could we by any chance use your upper room in the morning?" And they were like, "Yeah, come on." So I love the fact that as other customers were coming into Starbucks, they would have heard Christian hymns coming down, a lot of activity. And in fact, one of the students told me that the year before, they'd had the morning prayer meeting in Pret a Manger, but that store was being refurbished this year, so they couldn't use it. But the year before, when they'd used that store, one of the staff became a Christian, because she'd heard all the stuff going on, seen all these young people going up there and the enthusiasm, and she's like, what is this? And conversations had begun, and I think she'd eventually, done Alpha or Christianity Explored or something and become a Christian. So I love that even out of the morning prayer meeting last year, somebody come to faith. But that was a real joy, just seeing the passion to pray and to worship together in the students too.
That's fantastic. Now I've got 3 students in my family, so I'm going to make no response or comment about students and mornings. I'm not going to make or organizational.
Medical students are the worst, aren't they?
I'm not going to comment. Steve, could you give us a highlight from your experience of student mission? What stands out for you? Maybe at St Andrews or Glasgow or.
Yeah, sure. So I think I can't remember what the name of the department is exactly, but in St Andrews there's a big center for, I think it's like political research, something like that. And so the third evening that I was there, I was speaking on justice, and what best explains the foundation for justice. And so I think that was really good, because I think a lot of people are thinking around that, like what is the, I think the subtitle was, "Does faith have a place in the fight for a fair world?" And to show how faith in God, and particularly Christianity, with God's redemption and starting to renew all of us first, is the thing that ignites and catalyzes us to then go out and change the world. I think being able to share that with the students there was really, really something for me. And then the interactions that I had off the back of it were really good, like just really engaging. So I think in terms of sharing content and the engagements, that was definitely a highlight for me, even though it wasn't of all the events, it wasn't the biggest or the most well attended. I think it was just that the type of engagement really showed that people were thinking, and they could see how without God and without the cross, you know, you don't really have a great foundation and platform for thinking these things through, or having a great motivation to go out and want to change the world. So that for me was just really encouraging. But as Andy mentioned, it is a bit tricky because you're going in and you will share some thoughts and have some good interactions, but then you're out of there, and you don't know what happens, So you're going in, you're planting these seeds, which is amazing. And then you kind of go away and you pray and you know ask that the Lord would use it, but often you don't know. And so I think one of the really good encouragements and highlights for me was when I was then in Glasgow, I think it was last week, after I'd done the talks, I was chatting to a chap who came up to me, and he had been at the Glasgow Events Week the year before. And he came to speak to me and said, "Hey, you know what? Listen, I came to that and I wasn't a believer at all. But then there was this guy, Andy Bannister, and he came up and he just shared this amazing talk. And by the end of that, I left the venue as a believer." And so for me to hear that, it was just like so encouraging, because it shows that, you're going out there, you're doing something, and God is using it. He went off after that to, I think, join the CU and to join a church, and is now really plugged in. So to see that for me is just such an encouragement that this kind of work we're doing actually is bearing fruit. And that's just one of like so many stories. But that to me is a huge encouragement.
Yeah, that's terrific. And Steve, you got to work with UCCF for the first day, the Universities and Colleges Christian Fellowship. How was partnering with them? How did that go?
So much fun. They have such a great team, and I think the way that it's structured in terms of handing it over to the students to be the ones to really drive the thing is so empowering, and puts the task of evangelism and reaching out to the student community there in their hands. So it's not like, oh, we just get to do this and some outside bunch is coming. It's like, no, we are doing this, and we're being guided by this team. And so they resource them really well. The cohesion of the staff that I worked with was just fantastic. So I just thoroughly enjoyed it and really do look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, that's great. We want to celebrate our partnership. Solas, we are a partnership ministry. We always work on the ground with local ministries, with churches, with CU groups. We go where we're invited, and we love working and making friends with folks like that. So that's really important to kind of note that as we work through. Andy, you've been involved in student ministry for, I don't know how many decades. I wouldn't like to even think about putting a number on that. But
thank you for just really making me sound like I'm an old fogey, Gavin. Great work, my friend.
Seriously, how has student ministry sort of changed? Is it different than it was when you started out, or is it
similar? Well, back in the 1800s, young man, when
they were up chimneys.
I think I've been doing, it's about 15 to 20 years, and I think some things are very similar. I think that the passion and the desire to reach the campus are there. So I think some things have changed. I think one thing I've noticed changed is the nature of the questions has changed. Lots has been written and said about this, that I think, 15, 20 years ago, we were at the height of the so-called new atheism. Richard Dawkins was pumping out books like it's going out of fashion. It was not the figure of fun that he is today. And so I think you got a lot more of the sort of, science and, I can't believe in Christianity because of, biochemistry, or, CUs wanting you to do talks on 17 logical reasons for the existence of God and stuff. And that was good. And those questions are not gone away. They're still around. But I think there's a lot more students now asking questions about what we would say the more existential, the more feeling-based stuff. So questions around hope, meaning, beauty, truth. At Lancaster, another highlight was that one evening myself and my fellow kind of co-speaker there, Sharon Dirks, who's done stuff for us at Solas, we had a conversation about suffering, where the MC put questions to the two of us, and we just sort of chatted rather than do a talk. And to go, the response on that was phenomenal, because I think students really wanted to hear that and listen to that and engage with that. So some of the topics have shifted slightly. There's more of a spiritual openness. I think we've reached peak secular, and you've got a lot more students, I think, are open to talking about, particularly if you angle it in through spirituality and those kind of things. You know, Christians can sometimes be afraid of the S word, but actually spirituality is not where you want to stop, but it's where you can start. And I think there's opportunities. But then on the challenging side, and I think we appreciate people to pray into this a little bit, I think particularly students who've grown up through the COVID years, I think there's a little bit more for Christians, some of the Christian students, I think there's a little bit more reticence to take risks. It can take a little more effort sometimes to encourage people to get out and go the extra mile with the leafleting. You know, another friend of ours in Solas, Michael Otts, who does lots of university missions, you know, he likes to encourage students to stand up at the end of their lecture and do a shout out for the lunchtime event. And he said that's got a little bit harder because there's more risk averseness. He says I just bribe them now with chocolate, which I thought was a great idea. First person to do a shout out in one of their classes and come tell me they do that, I've got a bar of chocolate for you. And that's I think that's just a broader kind of sort of issue for the church more generally, is to help people go, you know, we don't, as Christians, risk averseness is not a spiritual gift. You know, exactly. You know, among the armor of God listed in Ephesians is not the hair suit of hesitancy or the I don't know, the socks of terror or something. So let's get
Well, I wear the cap of cowardice regularly.
yes, the underpants of uncertainty.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Steve, over the last few weeks, hundreds and hundreds of students have heard the gospel from you and Andy, and thousands more if you replicate that across the other CUs where other speakers have begun. So all over the country right now, there are students who have heard something of the gospel. Two questions on that. What are the CUs doing to kind of follow them up? And B, how can we pray into this current sort of situation when the word has kind of gone out across the country? So what are the CUs doing, and how can people pray into this?
Yeah, fantastic questions. So off the back of the events weeks, they are directing people to the Gospel of Mark through a really cool resource called Explore Mark, which is essentially the Gospel of Mark, and then that's the first kind of third of the book, and then the other third is really just, I think, explaining it and help you work through it. So you can come to that with no really Christian context at all and be able to walk through one of the Gospels in a really meaningful way, and that's really accessible. So I think that's a great thing that they've been doing. They're directing people to actually get involved, and they then have groups that they'll form together where they'll help people work through those things. So if there's someone, you know, off one of the evenings who's interested, they would then say, okay, well, come for the next 3 weeks on this evening. We're going to do just 3 weeks together working through this, where we'll help answer more questions and introduce you to Christianity a bit deeper. So I think it's great. It's not like, hey, here's the event week. Okay, well, now it's all done and dusted. They have really great follow-up, and through that, building more relationship and getting people into churches. And it seems that's really been the trend, and people do actually take them up on that and have great follow-up. So that's just one of the things they're directing people to. Andy, if there are other things that they were directed to and some of the ones you're involved with.
Yeah. No, I think similarly to go, you know, the last Lancaster, which I say just finished at the end of last week. I think, you know, they're starting similarly. They're doing, I think, two alpha courses running at different times. So I think, yeah, for those of you who pray, you know, do be praying when you hear the sort of places where we've been. Do be praying. There's always follow up of different kinds going on. And then I think, Gavin, another kind of prayer point, and we could put a link in the notes to this. If you sort of hang around Solas as a prayer supporter and stuff, you'll have caught wind of this really exciting resource that we've been privileged to work on called Have You Ever Wondered, which is a new book that Gavin and I edited. We've got lots of contributors to Solas over the years have written chapters in that book. And we're hoping and we're planning and we're praying that for next year's university mission season, that book, which is what we call a pre-evangelism book, it's a book to give to somebody who's thinking about spiritual things but hasn't yet figured out where Christianity even fits on the radar. That's a book you can give, very gentle, kind of fun introduction. So Gavin and I have written in there. Michael Otts has. Steve wasn't yet on the team by the time we did the book, or he'd have been in there too. But I would appreciate prayers that we really are hoping to get that into the hands of thousands of students, and still figuring out the best way to do that. But yeah, just pray for the follow-up. So for the Alpha groups, the Christianity Explored groups, and then for Solas, as we continue to try and really come alongside students and help find all the different ways we can serve them, whether it's through speaking, making resources available like short answers or or have you ever wondered? And those resources make a difference, right? I mean, Steve told that amazing story. I was almost in tears when I read that, what happened in Glasgow, particularly as I've been praying the day before and had a bit of a spiritual downer because I was so exhausted, just praying, come on, Lord, I want to see more things happening. And then bang, that came in. And then the same day, I was in the prayer meeting for the students in Canterbury, where one of the CU team, who's instrumental in the mission there, just said, "Oh, and of course, Andy, you know, by the way, don't you? Of course, you know, as you know, I came to faith through watching one of your Solas short answer videos a couple of years ago, and I went, "Oh, stop! Hang on, stop right there, stop right there! I did not know this story, so I thought I told you. No, you didn't. Tell me the story." And so I think it was the resurrection was one, but yeah, she watched that, and so that just really encouraged me that we don't always know where the stuff goes that goes out of Solas, whether it's stuff that, you know, Gavin, you've done, or Steve, whatever. So for all of you praying, please do pray, because those two stories from Canterbury, from Lancaster, and from Steve in Glasgow just reminded me we don't always see where things happen. We cast the seed out, we do the ministry. Sometimes you get a window into how God has used it. Sometimes you don't hear until, in this case, you know, a year after both stories, we finally got the end of what had happened.
Yeah, just prayer points. Would definitely be in line with what Andy said there. You know, we've gone out there and spoken to so many people, and I think been really clear in what the gospel is, no matter sort of what topic it is that we've been touching on. And so just pray that the Lord would use that and bring the right people around those people to help grow that faith. And then praying for the CUs, all those people who are still on the ground through the rest of the year. And then praying for us, the team here in Solas, I think, to just get more opportunities and to keep doing this well and faithfully. Yeah.
Thanks. Final word then, Andy. Most of the people watching this are going to be people who are prayer supporters and financial supporters that make this all possible. Would you just like to sign off for us by just sort of thanking the folks that make all this happen?
Yeah, well, thank you for that chance to do that, Gavin. And just, yeah, absolutely. So want to thank people who make this happen. I mean, two things you mentioned specifically there. One is the praying. You know, we always say at Solas, you could kind of feel the difference. You know, university missions, you really are. It can be hard ground, tough ground, and just knowing that people are praying is really, really, really encouraging. It makes a massive difference spiritually and emotionally to know when you're out there are people kind of praying. So it always excites us. And you know, without giving too much away, I want to say watch this space. We're working at Solas on some ways to perhaps increase the number of channels we have to make it easy for people to pray. So you can get things like on mission weeks and stuff, you get updates. But do be praying. The Insight newsletter that Gavin edits tells you where Gavin, Steve, are what we're doing and where we are. You also, if you're a social media person, you can follow us on Twitter or Instagram. Those kind of places will update you. So be praying. So thank you for praying. It means a huge amount. And then yes, for those of you who give, just again want to thank you, because some places where we go and do ministry, if we're partnering with a church, they can cover the costs. And it's wonderful if a church says, hey, can you come and do an event in a coffee shop and help us do some evangelism? And by the way, we can cover your travel expenses and give an honorarium. Brilliant. University missions, CUs are often done on a shoestring budget. There's very little resources often around. And so it's brilliant that we can say when a Christian union reach out to us to ask us to come and speak, we can say, if you can cover our costs, brilliant. If you can't, don't worry, because we have faithful donors who make that possible. So for those of you who are listening to this who are Solas donors, thank you for doing that. And if you're not a Solas donor and you want to become one, again, just go to the Solas webpage, click the donate button, and as a thank you, we will send you a free book. And one of the books we can send you is the Have You Ever Wondered book that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So thank you for giving and thank you for praying. And I hope you are encouraged. One of the reasons we like doing ministry reports like this one and the others that we do on the Solas website once a week is I hope that it encourages you to see this is the difference that your praying and your giving is making.
Brilliant. So thank you for watching this Solas special kind of ministry update. Hope it's been informative and helpful. Hopefully it will encourage you to keep praying and digging into that as well. Look out for weekly updates on our work on our website every Friday. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Steve, for joining us on this and sort of filling us in on what's been happening in the last few weeks. And thank you for watching too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.